What's the last modern AAA shooter you enjoyed? Like really, really enjoyed? Be it multiplayer or even single player. Imagine that. Modern AAA shooters seem to have certain issues. Army fatigues have been replaced with operator skins of every make and model. And by every make and model, I mean bright, saturated, and with an excessive amount of crossover into such cultural highlights like Monster Energy Drink, Little Caesars, and Seth Rogen. If good character design is good character silhouette, a heavily monetized fever nightmare must then be having two silent Bobs, a pizza delivery driver, and Seth Rogen slide cancel you into uninstalling your System32 folder. But enough has been said about the aggressive monetization policies pursued by companies like Epic, or the fact that the cartoon characters participating in the Cold War action drama game have the same hitbox as every other character in the game. What is the alternative should be our question. If you feel like your precious few gaming moments before your boss gets to resume farming you for shareholder shekels are wasted unless spent with a gun in your virtual hands flatlining people virtually, allow me to recommend MilSim games, aka divorced dad shooters like the ARMA series.
2057.
Not to be confused with boomer shooters, which would have been my other recommendation. Now, a big problem with hero shooters, arcade shooters, the dominant paradigm of the action shooter crop currently out there, is that intensity becomes synonymous with sensory overload. It's a format that works. Constantly bombarding your synapses is a most effective tactic for videos, for instance, and likewise, games like Call of Duty operate on a principle of constant stimulation. Not that kind, but rather a frame rate pacing of sprinting, sliding, and Seth Rogening. The metaphorical orchestra is persistent. There is no quiet between the notes. It is a constant fortissimo, very loud, very visually engaging, and by everything wholly in their world, dollars and cents in this case, or CP as it were, the player can never become too disengaged. The player might remember to breathe, or might remember that they are in fact not having any fun, just having their nerve endings viciously chewed on by hit markers, kill confirmations, and status alerts. Some might argue that this equals a state of perpetual, exhilarating engagement. These people have broccoli hair and spend all day doing biceps in the squat rack. In fact, this very constancy becomes a form of cognitive white noise. Your threat detection circuitry that usually responds forcefully to sudden dramatic changes in action video games are less engaged when change is constant. The action and on-screen graphics are so unrelenting that it establishes a new heightened baseline, forcing your brain onto a kind of autopilot where pure action-reaction supersedes contemplation. In the arcade shooter economy of violence, as well as for younger people looking to enter the workforce at the present, death is a minor inconvenience. A fleeting 10-second pause before re-entering the highly brand and color-saturated fray. Everything on screen screams high-stakes action, but every mechanic encourages a run-and-gun, low-stakes mentality where gameplay, though constant, becomes weightless. A series of disconnected events rather than a coherent narrative of survival. It is against this backdrop that the military simulation shooter genre, MilSim games, present a fascinating paradox. By deliberately rejecting the tenets of constant action and Seth Rogen, MilSims achieve a far deeper, far more coherent, and far more resonant form of intensity. Great music is not born from endless noise, but from the potent relationship between silence and sound. It is the silence between the notes that make the music. The core contrast of the MilSim experience is the quiet moment, the long, tense patrol through an empty field, The methodical scanning of a tree line from a concealed position, or the hushed listening for the rumble of an M1A1 Abrams battle tank. This silence, contrary to what modern AAA companies believe, does not equal emptiness and boredom, unless your dopamine receptors have been fried, in which case I sympathize. I myself have certain peculiarities and necessities when I do my day job, or write these overstuffed and unwanted scripts, or participate in coitus. The vacuum, usually stuffed with card screen overlays, cosmetics and whatnot, must now be filled with something else. Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and Alien Isolation understood it the best. No one is better equipped, nor more compelled to fill our minds with anticipation and dread than ourselves. ARMA is not a horror game series, except when it is, but utilizes the same tension-building techniques akin to the very best horror games. A great horror game cannot simply be an endless string of jump scares with no tension and dread built in between. Although, as a counter-argument, insert Five Nights at Freddy's sales figures right here. And a great action game, likewise, must build a tension framework in between the firefights. Then, every decision within this silence framework becomes monumentally heavy. The simple act of peeking a corner or firing a single shot is a calculated risk. Whether you have the correct angle on a tank, APC, or IFV's weak point, doubly so. It is not just the absence of sound and flashing hot elements, but rather the presence of meaning. If an arcade shooter's canvas looks like a kindergarten Jackson Pollock imitation sponsored by Marvel and G Fuel, the Milsim painting is one of those disquieting Zdzisław Beksiński pieces or a frieren foot fetish fanart. Either way, Kino, and most importantly, serves to amplify a desired specific feeling rather than numb the audience with sheer volume of impression. Too many impressions may keep us occupied, but ultimately desensitized. We are afforded no time to rest in the foreboding our own minds cook up when our attention is constantly stolen. The privilege of suggestion over explicit action, or horror in Beksiński's case, is exactly what Milsim games offer over arcade shooters. The consequences we fear when peeking around the corner in ARMA, Squad, or Hell Let Loose, a 5.56 to the brain, may never materialize, but the anticipation created in the negative, quiet space offers excellent contrast to the intense firefights when they do occur, as opposed to the constant firefights present in arcade shooters. This is exactly why this isn't just about violence escalation, but transformation. Now, I've never been a soldier, except that one time, but tactics, even for a single-player hermit like me, are sacrosanct to the Milsim genre. The quiet moments are not just anticipatory in the manner of waiting for where the crack of the bullet is coming from, but in the planning and execution of tactics imitating actual combat methods. Now, with all this talk of quiet, I risk making Milsim games seem mind-numbingly boring. And sure, I've been on supply runs, mortar squads, and backcabbing plus entrenching duties in squad aplenty, and it's for sure not my favorite duties, but coordinating logistics with other squad leaders, avoiding ambush alleys or combat hotspots is actually very fun. Not cope, I promise. And when you do get under fire while doing logi runs, the adrenaline is like nothing else any arcade shooter game can replicate. And actual military tactics are in fact not boring. It's not sliding around, sure, but the violence of action means tempo, tempo, tempo. Sometimes you're eating random mortars laying in the tree line, waiting for your armor to arrive, and sometimes you commit fully to immediate and overwhelming speed and aggression when pushing enemy positions. That's transformation, not just escalation of gameplay. In Call of Duty, everyone is zooming around all willy-nilly. There is a meta, and sometimes you're not holding down the fire button, but it's just arena combat. nothing else, which is fine, but at least boot up Unreal Tournament 99 instead. In contrast, fire and maneuver actions suppressing fire, these not only work, but are even incredible and exhilarating to be on the other side of. I'm not peeking my head up when the MGs are cascading lead on my position and Hell Let Loose, and being on the other side of a competent squad obliterating you doesn't feel great in the moment, but you just gotta have a different type of respect for a well-oiled team using tactics in eliminating you, versus the pure reaction test arcade shooters seem to be. Now, why do actual combat tactics look like they do? Obviously to maximize the success of a strategic objective, but also because, in general, not counting the Japanese, soldiers would prefer not to die. As I mentioned earlier, the cost of risk-taking has collapsed entirely in a game like Call of Duty or even Battlefield. The low cost of failure, a 5-10 second respawn timer after getting no-scoped, encourages a particular tactic. Slide fast, trade shots frequently, and prioritize moment-to-moment reward, kill-death ratio for instance, over long-term positioning. Milsim games succeed in creating actual fear. Not the fear of dying, obviously, unless you're playing ARMA free in Kiev, but the fear of wasting time, wasting carefully gathered information about enemy positioning, wasting you and your squad's coordinated plan, wasting the excellent positioning you've spent 10 minutes crawling into. That fear is subtle, but magnitudes more coercive than the fear of having a negative KDA or losing a match in an arcade or hero shooter. Although probably less so than the actual fear of dying, unless your name is Jamshid, the RPG god, of course. In other words, the catharsis is deeper in milsim games because the stakes feel more real in a practical sense. Now, insane claim to say that milsim games accurately portray the fear of dying like in real life combat. That's not my point. At least until they plug us directly into the game with a 2000 volt cable in our VR headsets. My point is that anything that moves the needle away from the low-risk feel of arcade shooters and towards high-stakes combat engagement that makes you fear the consequences of getting domed is the way to go when portraying wargames. And if this means that the fear of dying virtually is held up solely by the prospect of respawning 3 actual kilometers away from the combat theater and waiting for a transport team to return and get you back into combat, then so be it. We assign intensity not purely by the sensory magnitude of something, kill rewards, hit markers, Seth Rogen, etc., but by its context within our goals and investments. When action and combat follows a period of careful investment meaning emotional, anticipatory investment, or investment in a certain tactic with our squad and boys, or investment in not wanting to wait for the show-off heli pilot getting back to base after giving a legit air show to the enemy on every single transport pass, it triggers a richer bundle of responses depending on whether we succeed or fail, survive or die. Of course, milsim games aren't real, which is fortunate for the average player base and their prospects of avoiding going to The Hague. But real stakes often arise from the cumulative weight of time-invested choices and emotional suspense in the negative space of gameplay firefights. It's the waiting, it's the crawling, it's the patrolling. If you're looking for moments that feel earned, consequential, and emotionally resonant, milsim games like the ARMA series or Squad for the multiplayer frogs offers a more meaningful architecture of tension and release that linger in your actual memory long after the firefight is done, instead of just your muscle memory. Also, realistic war crimes are just way more fun.
Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Alright, that was a video. Comment down below which is your favorite military simulation game and why. Like and subscribe for more cromulent videos and for the good old algorithm, and check out my free video on Patreon down below in the description alongside all my other support links. Stay frosty for the next video.